Great privilege to introduce to you Sean Atleo, who is the BC Regional Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, and he is going to tell us exactly why we've all gathered here today. He's just come back from important work on behalf of the Assembly of First Nations in Southeast Asia. Please welcome Chief Sean Atleo Atinchuk.
Thank you, Kevin. This is a very important gathering and very important to acknowledge the territories that we're in. Tlekozush Songhis Hatwea, Utlasish A Inchat, Utlasish A Inchat, Ahusat, Nuchanochlat. My name is Sean Atleo. Inchat is my tribal name. I'm from the Ahousaht First Nation, west coast of Vancouver Island. And it's an honor and a privilege to stand here with all of you today to address a very important item. As Kevin has indicated, I've just returned from meeting with the indigenous people of Indonesia, and we're all aware of the tremendous tragedy to the people in that region. I've returned as of yesterday. And I think it's really critical that when we're examining the issue of our historic documents that are kept here in Victoria, that we consider and encourage those that are in positions of authority to respect our people, our chiefs, our Hatwea, and their need to have the most accurate information, the integrity of the historical data of our relationship with the land and of our developed relationship with newcomers to the territories. That there must be demonstrated respect by sitting down with our people, including our people in a meaningful manner. I've witnessed firsthand oppressive governments overseas. I've witnessed firsthand how it is that people are dispossessed of their territories. And we see consistently how governments, how nation states, how provinces and national governments continue to facilitate the dislocation of Indigenous people from their territories. And it's not something that's acceptable. It's not something that our people are going to allow to continue. This issue is very much connected to it. It is not minor. It is not insignificant, and it's one well worth paying attention to. When we're faced with issues that talk about our relationship with one another as people, as ko-us, the word in my language, as people, that there is a need to respect one another, to truly recognize one another. And so there is an opportunity. There's an opportunity to do this properly. There's an opportunity for the full proper recognition of one another to occur. And that requires, for the integrity of the documents, the integrity of the historic records that are stored in the Land Title Office, to be maintained with integrity, for full and meaningful participation of First Nations to occur. This is something that those gathered here today call on the provincial government to ensure that this occurs. And I'm honored to stand on behalf of the Assembly of First Nations with you today. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few words. The
fact that the United Nations has a special commissioner who deals with these matters on behalf of the entire world. And the chiefs that are assembled here today have prepared a letter which is going to the Special Rapporteur, Rodolphus Dunvergen. And I'll just read the letter, and as the chiefs have finished speaking, they can sign it, and we'll be sending it off to Geneva. It's addressed to the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights in Geneva, and the Special Rapporteur is Mr. Rodolphus Dunvergen. We are a representational group of First Nations chiefs from all over the province of British Columbia, Canada, gathered today in a rally in front of the Legislature, the seat of government for our province, to protest the failure of our federal and provincial governments to protect the cultural heritage of First Nations, Indigenous peoples in the province of British Columbia, and the heritage of all British Columbians. In accordance with your mandate under United Nations General Assembly Resolution 48141 of December the 20th, 1993, and subsequent resolutions, we, the undersigned chiefs, respectfully request you to call immediately on the federal government of Canada and on the provincial government of British Columbia and demand that maps and all other historical data in the 3 of BC's land title offices should promptly and properly be catalogued, conserved, and made readily available as hitherto to First Nations and other researchers and to anyone requiring data affecting land, history, topography, and genealogy in British Columbia, but with special reference to our Indigenous peoples. We also demand that First Nations be fully and adequately consulted and guaranteed ready, free access to and preservation of the maps and other records vital to treaty negotiations, specific claims, grave sites, and sacred heritage sites throughout British Columbia. And that's going to be signed by all our chiefs present here today.
Good afternoon. My Nuu-chah-nulth name is Taya. I'm from the Haudenosaunee tribe, and I'm pleased to be here to co-host the rally with Kevin. And I would like to call on Chief Wayne Morris of the Sartlip First Nation, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody here for your participation in something that our people look at as an injustice to what our people are all about. We look at the fact that the work that has been done to save the closure of the Land Titles Office, we've saved that, but now we're dealing with actions that government has basically reneged on. The fact that there was statements made to ensure that we had access to records, to mapping, to everything that is important to all of us. Important as our people look at our history. The mapping is something that shows where we are as people. It shows the grave site. It shows the burial sites. It shows the reserves which we now live on. When you look at the new mapping system, all of that's wiped off.
The issue that I ran into in December when my husband and I went into the land office in Victoria looking for an agricultural land reserve map, we wanted one somewhat like this one to see where the agricultural land reserve area was in the Lower Island. We were told that we couldn't get one, and we inquired, well, where can we go to get one? If you can't get it here, where can we get it? And they said we couldn't get one at all. It was later discovered that they had taken these maps and put them on a smaller scale, which is this one here. So the larger scale map, as you can see here, if you look at the Songhees Nation here, you can see that it's fairly detailed, right? It's large and it's fairly detailed. It shows all the lots, right? The housing lots, shows the cemetery. And then here it shows the ALR and the ALR, which is Agricultural Land Reserve, right? And then this one, which is what they changed them to, is really interesting because they didn't take the reserves off. It's still on there. You can see it's still on there here. But you can see it's different. It's not. We'll just take this one and look at it. You can see there's no lots on it. You can see it's quite a bit smaller. They've missed the cemetery out. And the implications on treaty, I think, are huge.
According to this map, this cemetery does not exist.
That's right.
Province-wide, it would be something of a real problem to all First Nations.
And I think the issue is not just that they've done that to these maps, but, if they had both available, it might be a different situation, but they've just said that you can't get these anymore, and whether they've destroyed them or just stashed them away somewhere is not quite clear, and this is the only one you can get now, so they're not even giving us a choice.
In prior meetings, there were statements made by the minister himself that we would be able to access any of these documents that we can.
And I feel that the government and its representatives have, again, done an end run around us so that they forget that we're here. And I remind them that we are the First Nations of this land and that we aren't going anywhere. This is our home. So with that, I want to thank everyone here for their support and showing that you have respect for the people that are here. Haj Kasiyam.
We are here also with the blessing of the City of Victoria. And 3 councillors in particular have asked me to read a greeting from the city. This comes from Councillors Rob Fleming, Jean Fortin, and Denise Savoy. We bring you a message of support for BC First Nations elders and leaders assembled today. Welcome to the capital city of our province. We thank you for the stand that you have taken to preserve access to the original historic records of our city and province stored in the Victoria Land Title Office. As city councillors for Victoria, a city that became official in 1854, 17 years before joining Confederation, we appreciate the importance of preserving our collective history. A capital city is a place that celebrates citizenship, knowledge, and culture. Rather than extolling efficiency over all other values, the provincial government should be dedicating itself to administering an exemplary land titles office system that puts first the preservation and enhancement of access to the records of the province on behalf of the people of BC and in particular of First Nations. Please come forward, Chief Fern.
Hi, Jack. Sam, Shell, Jack. Aishka, Makala, Nateto. Hi, Captain. Squamount First Nation, Sangis. Hi, Captain. I have here Simon Smith that he's one of the grave diggers, and it's a good opportunity for him to speak because that's part of his teaching. So working with our dead, there's Simon Smith. Hi, Jeff.
I too would like to thank the Sangis and the Squamish First Nations for having us in their territory. I really kind of come as a shock to me that I was going to speak today. I came here to support the chief, as I've been supporting him for years, and he's what he's trying to do, protecting our Tumquela, which is grave sites. And I support him all the time. And even when I was, I'm a former chief, but when I was a chief, I used to go with him to different sites talking about our grave sites. And I think that this is one of the things that sometimes we forget about as First Nations, that we have to protect those sites. They're very sacred. everything that's in the grave is sacred to the people, that Aboriginal people that have gone before us. And as he mentioned that I was a grave digger, you know, this is what we're asked to do. We got some of the crew here today come and support our the chief here. And it's very disturbing work what we do. You know, up today we have 40 remains coming out of Poets Cove. That's where we're working today. And the last 2 weeks we've been back. We went back to work. We were off for a while. We got 14 remains of our ancestors there. And we have thousands of artifacts. We don't know how many. But that's what we're saying, that even, you know, I hear some people saying that we have to record these things. I'm against recording those sites. Because the other day when a person asked me what I do, I told them that I go and go to the archaeology sites that have been disturbed by the developers. And we dig for the remains of our ancestors and also their treasures. But what he said to me, hey, there's good money in that, eh? He says, I got a friend who, that's all he does every day. He just goes out and digs around, looks for these treasures and sells them. So that's very disturbing to us. You know, our crew are supposed to be strong people. We're supposed to have the feeling where when we're doing our work we can't show any emotions. But I'm telling you, that last summer when we come across a lady in we came across a lady and a child. Our crew had to take a break. That's what it means to us when we come across something like that. It isn't just something that we do so we can make money. We do this because we show respect for our ancestors that are gone. That's all I come up here to speak on behalf of the chief of the SAICM. As I say, I've been supporting him for years. You know, whenever he has any places that he wants monitored, he asks me to come in for him and go and do the monitoring. So, and I thank him for that because I'm willing to do that kind of work. We have names for most of these places that we go to, whether it's food gathering or when we're fishing. We stay into some of these places, and we have names for them. But when you look at the map today, it doesn't have the names with the First Nations put in it. It's always got to be someone that just came to this land that gets recognized that they stayed there. Thank you very much.
Chief Robert Sinta from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs.
I'm Robert Sinta, political chief of Squilach, also the vice president of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Back home, even in my own community, in my own nation, we've always talked about the loss of our land. And it's these very things that are happening to us. You know, the Indian agents were supposed to be looking after our best interests, but meanwhile they were robbing us just as well as the provincial government. They're taking everything that we own. And I always stressed ever since I became chief in 1999 that no matter where you go, and this is going to scare a lot of people, no matter where you go, we own the underlying title. Whenever you own fee simple land, we still own that property underneath you. You only own a certain amount of ground. And ever since 1846, when we first had made contact with the non-native people. We're such a polite and generous people, right to this very day, that we have let you guys stay in our territory. And even though we have been robbed of all our resources, of all those years they've been here, we're still caring for you. I guess we'll be caring for you till the day you pass on. And you'll be buried in some cemetery in one of our nation's territories. And we never ever have thought of going out there and desecrating your graves. We never ever went out there to dig up your ancestors' remains. That's a respect for the people that we have, even though they're different nations of people. We respect you for who you are. So I sure appreciate the non-natives and especially the governments to respect us for who we are.
I have a privilege and pleasure to introduce an old friend of mine who has traveled all the way from Prince George to be with us today. Is Chief Pat Michel.
And I think at some point we will go so far as to mention the word fraud. This came to mind when I read this morning that certain records had been duplicated and evidence had basically been erased from those duplicates. The other part is that this evidence has been digitized, and as you all know from decisions in the courts, that digital information is not the most reliable information. We need to save the irreplaceable originals in an environment that does not allow for degradation.
Here we are again, the Nukal people, coming to be with the Songhees people. And anyway, with that, before I go on any further, I would like to invite the delegation that I have here from the Nukal territory. We are here as Nukal people, and I come from the Snushelto family, and my father has passed on to me concerning something that his grandmother had told him, and that was that she had met Alexander Mackenzie when he came to the coast. And so here we are. I'm the fifth generation from the time that we actually met the European people that came to visit us today. And anyway, I also have with me the next generation and the next generation after that.
But please warmly welcome Chief Eric Joseph from Kingsland Inlet.
Coast Salish Nations, the Songhees, for putting up this rally. It's really important. I came here to stand with you and support what First Nations needs to do. We're in a similar situation. We set up what the province would like to call a blockade. The reason why it hasn't been so much in the news is because they're afraid of negative publicity. When I say we're in a similar situation, International Forest Products is logging in a sacred valley of ours. This sacred valley, we have been working with the province to designate it as a protection area through the LRMP. But unfortunately, the province wants to designate it as a protection area after it's been logged. The reason why I say this is similar to the Land and Trust offices, because an archaeologist that has worked for Intifor and our band has found artifacts that date back 7,000 years. The reason why I say this is a sacred valley is because it pertains to our origin story. The origin story that I'm talking about was also it was presented to the opening games at the Commonwealth Games here in Victoria. I was told that the Queen herself requested this legend to be told prior to the games. So this is another indication of business as usual. Our people have been there for thousands of years. We'll be there for thousands and more to protect it and to enhance our culture. To the people that operate this building, we have 75 days left before the provincial election. They promise a golden decade. We can share and work towards that promise. If they don't change their ways and continue to move those goalposts, it could be a gray decade. It could be a black decade. They want certainty. Stop desecrating our sacred areas, grave sites. That's our message. Work with us. Thank you.
To welcome one of New Toronto's finest leaders from the southern region. If I could ask David Dennis to come up here and say a few words.
As we know, this province, as speakers have said before, belongs 100% to our people. Indigenous people who have been here since time immemorial. And we say that because we believe our ancestry, our culture, our right to be is passed down from our forefathers and foremothers. And we rely on that oral tradition to understand our place within our society. And unfortunately, the province doesn't accept that as evidence. What they rely on is what they refer to as empirical evidence. And empirical evidence, of course, is the many surveyors' reports, the many maps, the many times that people have made and built roads. This society that has erected all around us, all of that can be dated to a point where there was an explorer coming here to explore new lands and to create what they refer to as a great society. And all of that evidence, of course, is collected and maintained in a registry. And this place is called the Lands Titles Office. So it's an ironic position for the government to say on one hand that they do not accept oral tradition as empirical evidence and then limit and deny access to what they refer to as empirical evidence. So it's these many ironies that frustrate our people in this province. And I think it's that frustration level that is growing at an alarming rate within all of the nations within BC. Last spring, for example, 3,000 Indians came here. They came here to show this government that the golden goose that sits behind the chair over there, Gordon Campbell, will not lay golden eggs in this new decade. And in fact, what he's demonstrated, he is not the golden goose, he's a lame duck. So we really hope to impress upon that lame duck that as Indians, we do not respect lame ducks that crap all over our territories and tell us what to do. So we want the government to know that our hereditary chiefs, our people, are determined to make history for themselves. And I am happy to announce that at both the AFN level, the Summit level, and the Union of BC Indian Chiefs level, that the Title and Rights Alliance is alive and will be marching here in the spring once again.
Every step of this land question issue has been a struggle, has been a fight, and we're partly to blame. We need, and I haven't heard anybody welcome our non-Aboriginal friends who are here in support. I want to welcome you, and I want to thank you for the coming out. But I'm going to ask you that you need to speak out. The issues are there, and we need to look for solutions. We can fight, but if we could become proactive and to support our leaders to go out and fight. But while you're at home, call on your elders, call on your young people, and teach them. And I want to thank the organizers for inviting us, and to Jonathan, thank you for coming. I know a lot of you came on short notice, but especially the hot way. I want to thank you for coming to support a great cause and a great people.
There's another group that sends greetings to us from a long way away, and that's the sovereign nation of the Nishka. And their local representative, who's brought a message of greeting, is His Excellency Bishop John Hannon.
One of the most important figures I think in the last century, one of our leaders, Dr. Frank Calder. Dr. Calder is in his 90th year, and when I was speaking to him, he said his health does not allow him to be here today, but he sends his greetings and his support. And for many decades, Frank was at the forefront of the struggle for recognition of Aboriginal title, both as a member of this legislature as well as the one who took the Calder case to the Supreme Court that opened up negotiations for all First Nations people in Canada. And I bring greetings from Dr. Frank Calder. I also bring greetings from Nelson Leeson, the president of the Nisga'a government. They have written a letter which is not yet in my hands, and so I am unable to read that letter. But I do assure you of the support of the Nisga'a Nation in this struggle. It is of critical importance for the whole of the province, including those of us on the North Coast and in the interior, Prince George and all over the place. And it continues, even though the Nisga'a have a treaty, it continues to be of prime importance to us, because as we've heard some of the other speakers, what are in those records, the government accepts with a kind of credibility that they do not accept some of our oral traditions and stories. And as we continue that relationship, the Nisga'a people who have a treaty, that's going to be critical to that continuing relationship. And so also I want to convey the support of the churches, the Diocese of British Columbia, and the church, the Anglican Church of this province, the United Church. I acknowledge at this time Father Rene Fumalo, who's one of the great heroes from the Northwest Territories in regard to a recognition of Aboriginal claims. And thank you, Father, for being here.
Namely, the very first person to be elected to Parliament as an MP and the first person to become a First Nations senator. I don't need to tell you who his name is, Senator Len Marchand. And he isn't able to be with us today, but he does send greetings. And he said that as far as the preservation of the documents and First Nations access to them, he considers that to be a most important and urgent matter, and he undertakes to take it up with the Prime Minister Paul Martin. Here we are after the rally outside the Premier's office, and I have with me Dr. John Lutz, who's a professor of history in the Faculty of History at the University of Victoria.
These records are important to all British Columbians. These are the foundation of our history. Every other historical document in British Columbia rests, if you like, on the foundation of the transfer of title and property from, first of all, First Nations to the Crown, and then from the Crown to landholders. So all of us, our histories are all dependent on those records. So these records have been treated as operational records for the century and a half that they've been in existence, and they show it. They're crumbling, they're wearing out, they're not preserved like proper archival documents would be. Every book you open, every file you open is a treasure in that office. For example, I'm doing research on the Chilcotin War of 1864, a key event in the history of British Columbia, and opened a book one day just by accident, and there was the name of the man who bought the town site from the government that started the war, and that document has never been published or seen or been part of the histories of the Chilcotin War to this day. And you open a file, and in one happened to be what's probably the earliest map of and property transfer in the municipality of Oak Bay. This map, because of its historic importance, was presented to the mayor of Oak Bay, mayor and council of Oak Bay, who received it with thanks, and I believe it's now mounted in the council chambers in Oak Bay.
And they had never seen that before. There was the very first conveyance of the very first piece of property in Oak Bay, and it was completely unknown until about October of last year.
There's thousands of these treasures tucked away in that vault, and there's no good index to those documents. Yeah, I think, first of all, they should have been preserved over the years, and we're in a risk of losing many of those documents if action is not taken promptly. And secondly, I don't think the government should have transferred those from its own care to the care of a non-governmental authority.
But the government says that we've nothing to worry about because everything is on microfilm.
Microfilm is not a substitute for the originals for several reasons. One, microfilm shelf life is not much longer than paper, and we know it degrades, and we're experiencing the problems with that now. Secondly, microfilm doesn't capture all the information on a document. It doesn't capture some of the material that's written in colored pen, especially light-colored ink, and these documents are fading. And it often cuts off parts, and they're not always clear. Sometimes they're out of focus, and if you've destroyed the original, you've lost the document. I think all the heritage organizations in the province are concerned about this, and so there's a coalition who have written the government repeatedly now asking for the preservation and access to these documents to be improved. And these include the Archivists Association of British Columbia, the British Columbia Historical Federation, the genealogical societies of BC and of Victoria, all the local historical societies, the Map History Society of BC. Almost everybody who's heard about it has joined this coalition. We had a demonstration at the Land Title Office.
And who took part in that demonstration?
Speakers from most of these organizations, colleagues from the university, Professor Hamar Foster of the Law Faculty, Dr. Eric Sager of the History Department, Lara Wilson representing the Archivists Association of British Columbia, and Joan McElmoyle Cleghorn representing the Victoria Genealogical Society. We're all there expressing their deep concerns. I cannot think of a function more core to the government than protecting and holding these records.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Zeb King from Central Saanich, for coming down to the rally today.
It's quite proud of my community of Central Saanich for stepping up and standing alongside the First Nations on this important issue. Yeah.
And you have some First Nations actually in your community.
That's right. Yeah. Sartlip and Sayout are in our community. It's to the Premier of the province. It says, Council shares many of the concerns which have been expressed by the First Nations communities in this regard, and respectfully requests that this matter be reconsidered by your government and that the necessary steps be taken to ensure that the appropriate maps and related historical data are fully available and accessible to all interested and impacted parties.
And have you heard from the Premier in response
unfortunately, to that? No.
Not yet?
No, not yet.
Well, it's only been a couple of months. There have been a number of people that would like to have attended the rally today but weren't able to, but they've sent very important letters. And the first one I want to refer to is the Union of British Columbian Indian Chiefs, the oldest organization of First Nation chiefs in the province, has observed that several cases have been presented to the courts by First Nations concerning the direct relation to the province of BC's lack of consultation on matters directly affecting Aboriginal title and rights. And it's signed by Chief Stuart Phillip, the President, by Chief Robert Sinter, the Vice President, and by Chief Mike Ristasket, the Secretary-Treasurer. This is from the Métis Nations of Greater Victoria. It seems highly irresponsible of the government to hand over management and control of vital public records collected over a period of 150 years or so, when they have no idea, because they have not properly catalogued them, what they are handing over control of to the new authority. These priceless historical documents need to be carefully preserved and catalogued by a properly qualified team of experts. The government has repeatedly refused to consider appointing a professional historian, despite the fact that the new board will be making decisions about the historical value of maps, plans, and other documents under its control, affecting all British Columbians. Furthermore, this new authority has the power to destroy them or dispose of them too. And that letter is signed by Jack MacDonald, president of the Métis Nation of Greater Victoria. From the David Suzuki Foundation. Minister, since time immemorial, Indigenous peoples have held title to the lands of the Americas. In 1982, Canada's Constitution was repatriated from the United Kingdom, and Section 35 recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights. And that is a letter from the David Suzuki Foundation, signed by Jim Fulton. Jim Fulton, you may remember, was a member of Parliament for Skeena in British Columbia's northwest for some 14 years, and for the past 12 years has been the executive director of the David Suzuki Foundation.